is no more room in hell. The dead will walk the earth. Hi everyone, happy Monday evening. I had my class earlier today, so hence the later video than normal. Tonight I want to give a special shout out to Uri over in our International Affairs Department. He's the one that gave me this nice, beautiful hoodie to go out and promote the university. But the big thing is, right now I don't want his job, given the current situation. But, he's done really good work for Annapolis. He's the one that ensures that our students are out there and safe. So he's working very hard in this last little while to help with that. And I know his team. So shout out to you guys over there today. So some of you might know that line. In fact, it's in a few different movies, and it's a rather interesting one because it comes out of the works of Romero in terms of his Dead series and zombie films. And so today what I want to talk to you about is zombie films and what I've learned from them and how can it help us right now. Around the early 2000s, and this is probably corresponding with the remake of Dawn of the Dead and a few other zombie films that came out, and probably Max Brooks's World War Z book, there was a renewed interest in zombies as a cultural phenomenon. As part of this, epidemiologists and scientists also started to use zombies as kind of a testing ground in order to talk about plagues in general, and also to talk about preparedness. The idea in this is if you talk about an actual common problem, there are people who kind of clam up. They think that it's not as interesting, or that, there's no reason to have emergency preparedness. And so zombies was kind of used as a cultural touchstone in which we could communicate with the general public. And one of the works that I was present in was Mathematical Modeling of Zombies, which was edited by Robert Smith. And you might say, why am I saying his name so weirdly? He legally changed his name to have a question mark on the end of it. So his legal name is Robert Smith. As in, who is this person? Mostly because there's so many people named Smith that R. Smith is, I guess, a very common publication name. But he started working on creating kind of these epidemiology profiles using zombies as the medium of exchange inside of this. I think part of this is also because if you start talking about things like HIV or some other common disease, people are like, well, somebody has that, and you kind of clam up the communication guidelines. There's stigmatization and issues there. But if you talk about zombie, nobody has zombie, as far as I know. And I think zombies are kind of one of those safe things for talking about in terms of, I don't think anybody really likes a zombie. Now, I'm certain I'll probably see some comments in the bottom of zombie activists telling me about how horrible I am talking about it in this way. Zombies have rights too. More brains for the zombies. But I think there's some value in this, and at the time it was even kind of taken by a joke by certain people. There was even a rather interesting exchange inside the Canadian Parliament in which one of the opposition parties came up because the Canadian government had put out a pamphlet on kind of like zombie preparedness, and that was mostly just to get you engaged in preparedness to begin with, like having 3 days of food and water on stock and what to do in the case of an emergency. And the opposition party was like, Dear Minister, is it true that you're putting money behind support to prevent zombies from eating our citizenry? And the response from the minister in a kind of a flippant retort was, yes, we're going to guarantee the safety of Canadians against zombies. So, yay. But zombie is kind of inside of a media platform a way to talk about things that are actually going on in society without directly pointing to where the problem is. This is one of the great pieces of sci-fi and horror fictions, is that the disease of zombieism stands in for a lot of stuff. And I think we're even seeing it today. Because zombie films are not about blood, gore, zombies. As much as we enjoy those parts of those movies, it really is about the humans inside of those movies. Very few movies have really followed it from the zombies' perspective, and if they do, it's always from a very humorous standpoint. And even there, it's still a commentary on humanity. So the first part of any of these zombie films that we see is lack of preparedness. This is on the part of the government. This is on the part of the people inside of the movies. Very few people really have a plan of what to do if there's a shutdown, if something happens. Very few people have those resources on hand to deal with this. And so what we see early on inside of these movies is kind of these, it always goes into this whole societal collapse. Partially because there is no preparedness. Secondly, we see commentaries on how do we respond to somebody with the disease. There's a lot of emotion inside of there. There's a lot of fear inside of there. If someone gets bit, right, you want to push them away and guard against that. And there's lots of commentary inside of these movies about the emotional standpoint. A lot of it is about dealing with loss and how does the human condition change when you see someone that you love and care about in that position. Currently, we also see all of this issues of hoarding and guarding of stuff, and this, there's sometimes a mega corporation involved in these films, and how do they treat people inside of it? And I think one of the biggest tropes inside of these movies is always the bit person that covers it up. And we've seen with this most current issue that people, when they hide it, end up dealing and causing more damage to their friends and family members around them than if they had just told people about it. The other part in all of these films is courage and sacrifice. So often we see in these films that it's really not the zombies that are the enemy. That it's humans and how they act towards one another and how they deal with one another. Dawn of the Dead is probably the best example of this, and I'm not talking about the most recent 2004 remake, but the original. So just to take you through this, at the start of the film, we start kind of following a SWAT team member that's moving through an apartment complex in which they're basically hiding zombies inside of this. And the question that a lot of them are asking is, why would they guard these people? Why would they go after these people? And the answer mostly is they want to honor these people that are part of their community and guard them from the fate that is in store, even though there is this epidemic and issue. We see the panic, the worry as our characters kind of move off, get into a helicopter and escape over into a mall. And so then they move into this mall and they're kind of sheltering in place, and they're looking for a place that has resources, that has food, that has weaponry and everything that they're going to require. And, it's an American mall, so that means that it has a gun store and that it has a big giant chest freezer. And so they seem to have everything put out for them. And so the start of this, after they've kind of cleared out enough of the zombies that the area is safe, so there's a whole big scene of them moving through and kind of securing and locking down the building. The first thing that they do is they party, right? They're safe, they're guarded, they're away from everything. And so there's all these wonderful scenes in which they're basically exploring this mall and putting on clothing and finding various resources and messing around and, shooting zombies and putting bets on it, like that sort of thing. And as time goes on, we kind of see them moving in and guarding off a certain area, and you go into kind of this upper, what used to be the administration of the building. And they've basically turned it into almost like this perfect consumeristic apartment in which they have everything that they could ever want. They're aside from the world. They're kind of separate from it. And what happens is the movie begins to kind of slow down, and there's a bit of malaise as they move through. And it gets really slow at that point in the film. And I think part of this is to kind of, put into sense the cabin fever that they're feeling, the isolation that they're feeling. In this area, too, also one of them happens to get bit. And you have the whole discussion over what do we do with this guy who has been infected inside of it. And so this is kind of like the middle gets really slow and goes into this of what do we do. So at this point, they have everything that they need, but what they realize is that it's kind of the community and it's having that kind of contact with the outside world. And so it also gets down to this point of them discussing, do we live here forever? Do we leave? What do we do now? And finally, we have the big finale, because of course we do, in which a biker gang that has been roaming the area finds out that they're in the mall and then breaks into it and crushes it down and tries to steal all their stuff. And of course, they go to defend it, and one of them gets killed within the process, and pretty much all the bikers get killed. And again, it's not the zombies that were the danger at this point. It was man's inhumanity towards man, and the danger of those who weren't prepared, who are now kind of going after those that are. The original plan for the script actually was to kill the last two characters. Luckily, that doesn't happen within Dawn of the Dead, and they escaped. I guess the testing audience didn't enjoy that, and I think the ending is much better for the fact that they did survive. But when they do escape, it again turns into one of those, well, what do we do now? And I think if we're going to learn anything from this, it really is that middle part of the movie right at the moment. So yes, if you're trying to stave off cabin fever at the moment, check out Dawn of the Dead and take a look at some other zombie films. Maybe it's a bit too close to what's happening right now, but I think there's something that we can learn from inside of them. And I think a lot of it has to do with how do we treat one another in such of a time of crisis. So, as always, stay safe and wash your hands.